We're jumping into some Runebound 3rd edition Tactica. Building that checklist starting out. What are some of the things that I try to keep in mind, then modified a little bit based on the type of character that I want to play, and finally modified based on the mission. Now, certainly in the base game and building out with some of the expansions, there is an end fight. There is an end condition. Admittedly, some are easier than others, but you're going to have enough stuff, enough abilities, enough items, enough tokens, runes, pogs, whatever we're calling this, the system of casting your fate, to be able to overcome that. But the big challenge, yes, the end game is ever looming, and that's great because it creates some awesome narrative tension. But the big question that you're working against, the force, the dynamic, is the event timer. The fact that you essentially have this countdown track, this doom track, borrowing from 2nd edition Runebound, where whether you're ready or not, things are going to activate. And of course, at various points as the track progresses in the story, other things are going to unfold, and that gives real life to the game, in my opinion. This is a duality here. Runebound 3rd edition, I do like the timer track because it for better or for worse, it forces you to make decisions, and you're going to get in a complete gaming adventure in a set amount of time. Whether you're ready or not, that end game is going to unfold. Those out there who are min-max players and you want to just level up and crush and then be ready and move in, we saw this with Runebound 2nd edition. And I love 2nd edition also, but the Doom track was an alternate way to play. 2nd edition, you could essentially just power up like mad and forever and then go and fight the end game on that. So I like the timer, but we need to keep that in mind. So there are things you can control in the game in terms of, with this checklist we're going to look at, and the things that you can't control, market items, how things spawn, when you draw the various cards, whether it's an encounter, a social, or an exploration. And again, those 3 type of cards that you draw based on the flavor of the adventure you're looking, there are a few wild cards thrown in there. An example like some of the social interactions, you think you're getting a social interaction, but it might be a combat. So just for the sake of this randomness, that's something that we can't control. We can only operate on what the game presents to itself. Tactically, we want to try and move on the roads as best we can, and for the most part that we can, because we can use any type of movement dice in there to quickly navigate up and down. Ideally, staying in the middle center-ish of the board, we can radiate out. It is not efficient to be at the top of the board and then have to go down to the bottom of the board, whether it's a quest or whether it's to obtain an item, or even just you've been farming at the top of the board for some reason because there's some really good stuff, and Margrath is like 2 turns away from spawning, and he's going to start making his run to burn down the central cities and stuff. Are you going to be able to get there in time? So ideally, I want to try and stay in the center of the board. One of the observations that players have noticed online, they say, well, the quest option seems really interesting. This idea that you can draw a card, here's some rumors, you find a map, whatever, and if you go to this spot on the board, you resolve a quest. You roll some dice, and you get a reward. The challenge here, of course, is you can draw the quest on the bottom of the map. That tells you to go to the top of the map to fulfill it. That's a lot of travel up there. So if I'm looking to play any quest tokens to gather them, I want to try and stay in the middle. So this way I can decide if it's worth it. At least I'm traversing half the board and not the full board from that perspective. Boosting your movement dice early on. So there's a couple of items, the Boots of Speed. There's a couple of other ways to move fast through abilities, essentially to gain extra movement dice in there. That is something that if it reveals itself early on in the game, because again, the market deck is going to be completely random on there. Other aspects are going to be random. They might come out at the beginning of the game. They might come out at the end of the game. They might never come out in the game, depending on what you have stacked in there. So ideally, if I'm radiating in the center of the board and I'm trying to fulfill quests through there, then when that does appear, I can go for it. And if it appears early on, that's when I want to go for it. When the timer flips, so we go through, well, it depends on where you're sitting at the table, right? If I'm sitting with the board in front of me, the timer track on the left side, when it flips to the second run, now everything becomes more potent. Now everything becomes more powerful by adding a different set or additional runes, pogs, tokens, whatever we're going to call it, to cast out. That's not the time to now start taking risks and get killed and get knocked out or lose stuff on there, depending on the mission that you're playing. That's when I want to become conservative, because at that point, the encounters, they power up so much that even if I win, I'm going to take damage. I'm going to take damage. Now I have to heal up, and I have to spend those last few spaces on the timer track to be healing up rather than making final preparations for endgame. So given the choice, now we're kind of looking at this from competitive play, optimized play. One of the great things about 3rd edition is you can play a character and I'm just going to do social quests, and I'm going to see how it plays out. I'm just going to roam the realm, roam Terranoth, leveling up, everything like that, and see what happens. Like that works. That's awesome on there. That's awesome. But if we're looking to just try and become this mega powerful beast, I want to do, in my opinion, the checklist. The first pass through on the timer track, I want to get all of my fights in. I want to fight stuff. It's not going to be powered up. It'll give me a good boost of gold. I'm going to buy stuff. When it flips to the second timer track, that's when I want to start really doing the social quests. Because at that point, the reward is less, or it's a different type of reward, gain some cards or be able to expend this quest card for something else. But at least then I won't be having to spend a turn or two potentially healing up on there, getting to the end game. Now, that is reducing an awesome narrative game down to kind of a formula. But for me, and Runebound 3rd Edition is a great example of an amazing narrative quest game. That's just the checklist. What's layered in there is you have to have the flexibility to look and see what's available, what's going on, what's spawning, what are the other players doing in there, what are we doing as a unified team, the other characters in the game. Those are dynamics that are constantly, those are parameters that are constantly changing turn by turn by turn to see and utilize.